Hi, this is Zac Hill here at the Tournament Center with Player of the Year Owen Turtenwald. Now you've come to play Modern with a Zoo deck. It's a little bit different from some of the other decks we've seen. Why did you decide to play a deck like this for this event?
Well, I always like to play Zoo. I've played it in like a bunch of other tournaments in the past. So, like I already had a preference for that coming in, but I knew that this tournament was going to be a ton of like super good players. So I already going in, I wanted to play something aggressive and something that had like a nut draw, because if I played against somebody who did more preparation, had a better deck, is a better player, I could just have a good hand and win, or they could mulligan, and you're never, like if they keep a bad hand, you're always going to punish them with a deck like this.
Yeah, that makes sense. So talk to us about like what that nut draw looks like. What is the best possible draw for the deck? We've got all the cards laid out here.
Well, I would say a perfect hand for this deck involves turn 1 Steppe Lynx.
Okay.
Fueled by fetch lands, obviously. 1 mana 4/5 is pretty good. Turn 2, like Loam Lion and Grim Lavamancer. You want to have the 1-drop into 1-drop, 1-drop. And even though Lavamancer by itself is not like insanely strong, aggressive creature alone, when you have a little bit of a clock going and then you put a Lavamancer down, it's just another problem. As your opponent's just like, well, I have to deal with these creatures, and then after that, I got to kill the Lavamancer. So if the board gets gummed up, you can start shooting them. You can be removing blockers.
Right.
It's really powerful.
And they can't just sit and block it. So let's walk through some of the threats in the deck. There's the 4 Lavamancers we've talked about. 4 Steppe Lynx, again, what you want on turn 1. Now, 4 Kird Ape and 4 Loam Lion with only 3 Tarmogoyf. Now, Tarmogoyf, obviously one of the best creatures ever printed. Why is it that, a creature-cat is 4 copies and Tarmogoyf only gets him for 3?
Well, we had a strong indication that at least one player would play the deck that won from the World Magic Cup, the Tsuchin Ku's deck.
Yeah.
And it had 4 copies of Spell Snare and Sideboard Threads of Disloyalty. So it's like Tarmogoyf is horrible against that. Like in older formats, there used to be like a Fairies deck that had 4 Spell Snare and then would sideboard 3 or 4 Threads. And I would always board out Tarmogoyf, and their cards are just awful. It's like Threads when you take a Kird Ape. It's my 2/3 turns into your 1/1. So it's like it just loses so much of its luster. It's like it's not like Grim Lavamancer and Steppe Lynx are good defensive creatures either. Like if Threads your Tarmogoyf, you're just like, ugh, now I have to remove that. But it's just completely different now. And on top of that, we knew that people would be preparing for a format with Delver of Secrets and Steppe Lynx.
Sure.
Because there's a couple decks that have like stuff like that.
Right.
And there's Birthing Pod, which also has like the cheap, aggressive, the mana accelerators. It just has really cheap creatures. So if you want to be building a deck that's good against other decks in the format, you're going to want cheap spot removal. And I would way rather spend 1 mana on a creature if it's just going to die than 2.
Sure. Well, you're talking about cheap spot removal. I noticed the deck does have blue 4 Geist of Saint Traft, but nowhere in this lineup of creatures is Snapcaster Mage, which is what a lot of people were playing blue in their Zoo decks for.
Yeah.
How did you get to realizing that you didn't want to play that card?
I didn't like Snapcaster Mage because, I mean, it's going to sound a little foolish, but it's only as good as the card that you're flashing back. Like if you Snapcaster back like a 1 mana draw card, it's like not good at all.
Yeah,
but if you Snapcaster back like Tribal Flames, then it's like pretty powerful. So I didn't like Snapcaster Mage because it's always going to be returning a piece of spot removal. So if it's a 3 mana Path to Exile or a 3 mana Lightning Bolt, it's like it's okay, just not that great. I would way rather have a 1 mana creature that's just going to be putting on pressure earlier. And I just didn't feel like the expensive cost was really worth it.
Sure, so you just want to improve the consistency of your deck, have better opening hands.
Yeah, I just wanted it to be more aggressive, and it's another card that just plays into Spell Snare.
Cool. Yeah, and that right. With only 3 Tarmogoyfs as creature threats that get hit by Spell Snare, it's really hard for them to protect your early rush. Cool. Well, let's talk about some of those spot removal cards that you mentioned. You've got a very straightforward lineup: 4 Path to Exile, 4 Lightning Helix, 4 Tribal Flames, 4 Lightning Bolt. It seems like this is very direct, very straightforward, not a lot of finesse, just kind of sending burn at their face and killing their guys.
It's like pretty automatic that you want to play like all these cards. Like when we were testing, we played like a ton of games and we're swapping out cards and trying stuff, and then we just kept coming back to the fact that it's like you're playing Zoo, you want to stay aggressive, you want to have burn. Playing less than 4 Path to Exile is going to hurt you a lot against a deck that has Tarmogoyf or Birthing Pod, Restoration Angel. Like a lot of those games are like completely different if you have a Path to Exile or not. So it would be foolish to play less than 4. And then on top of that, it's like, are you going to really show up with like only 3 Lightning Bolts? Like, same thing for like Tribal Flames. And these cards get better in multiples. Like when you're like, the different, like 2 mana for 5 damage is pretty good. But when you can do 10 damage, then it's like you're talking like some serious reach there.
Oh, sure, yeah. Sometimes you look at your hand, you have 2 Tribal Flames.
Yeah, and then you're like, all right, tick, 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 tick. Like,
yeah, your opponent cracks a sack land for a dual land, and you're like, okay, well, we're almost there.
That was another huge selling point for the deck is like a lot of these decks have like really stretched mana bases.
Right.
And they have to like be paying 2 life for a dual land to be like playing a Serum Visions. And it's just like, okay, like you're just helping me out.
Right, they more than time walked themselves.
Yeah.
They like gave you a free burn spell too.
Yeah, they have cards that are like slower and a little bit inefficient against Zoo, and they have like the mana base that like is taking damage. So
sure. Okay, so we're talking a lot about mana bases. I was looking at your mana base here. Obviously, to maximize Steppe Lynx, we want a lot of sack lands. We see 4 Arid Mesa, 4 Misties, 4 Marsh Flats, only 3 Scalding Tarns. Why did we not go with the full 16 sack lands?
Because I didn't want to play more lands than I already had, and you can't really cut one of the dual lands. Like each one serves like a pretty specific purpose. Like a lot of your hands, like if you want to go fetch like a blue-red on turn 1, you need like exactly a green-white because you want to have the green for your Kird Ape, you want to have red-white for Lightning Helix, you want to have blue-white for Geist of Traft, and like you just need really specific setups of mana. Like you can't just get lands at random. Like if you cut one of the lands, then like one of the other lands is going to become like obsolete basically.
Oh, okay. And talking about those combinations, what are the combinations of lands that you usually need to assemble?
The most common is you want to get blue-red on turn 1, green-white on turn 2, and then black-red, because it's going to give you 2 mana for Lightning Helix, 3 mana for Geist, 5 colors for Tribal Flames, and it's going to start you off with like Temple Garden Steppe Lynx, Steam Vents, Loam Lion, Lavamancer, and then like hopefully Geist after that or something.
That's not a bad draw. It doesn't sound like.
It happens all the time.
Cool. So we've got Stomping Ground, Sacred Foundry, Blood Crypt, Steam Vents, Hallowed Fountain, Temple Garden. Basically every land, the combination you need. You're playing 1 basic Plains. How did you decide that the basic land you wanted was white?
Well, we have Oblivion Ring here in the sideboard, and we have 4 Arid Mesa and 4 Marsh Flats. So being able to fetch a white land and then being able to like have access to white mana for after a Blood Moon. Like Blood Moon's like pretty huge because like anyone who plays against a 5-color deck is obviously going to bring in Blood Moon. And so
they figured it out.
Yeah, and one of the tricks for this deck is like when we play against a Blood Moon deck, we usually board out Tribal Flames. And if you just look at the cards, they're all red and white. So if you make all my lands red and I have a Plains, like I can still play Steppe Lynx, Lightning Bolt, Lightning Helix. Lavamancer operates pretty good. You have Oblivion Ring, and then you have like Ranger of Eos, which is awesome as well.
Cool. Well, and you started mentioning some sideboard cards. Let's talk about those. Explain to us, I mean, Oblivion Ring, you know, a nice versatile answer. What is it you're trying to answer with a card like Oblivion Ring?
The best cards to Oblivion Ring, I would say, are Tarmogoyf. Because first of all, like a lot of like Jund has like hand disruption, so they can like take your Path to Exile and then play a Tarmogoyf, and you're like, I hope I draw another Path to Exile now. Right. So having more answers to like a Tarmogoyf is like pretty important. It's very good against Kitchen Finks, which Birthing Pod has. It can remove Birthing Pod. I don't know. It's just really versatile. Cool. It can remove Blood Moon. One of Rug Delver's main ways of beating you is with Blood Moon and Vidalcan Shackles.
Yeah, and both those threats, I mean, Vidalcan Shackles can take basically all your guys. Even Geist of Traft, they can just take the Angel, and you're only 2ing them every turn.
That's correct.
So why, you talked about Ranger of Eos as a card that your planes help you cast. What is Ranger doing in the deck? What matchups is it good in?
It's not there for any matchup specifically, but Ranger of Eos is basically the best card you can have against an opponent who's preparing against like a Zoo deck. Like if your opponent is playing like Lightning Bolt, Path to Exile.
Right.
If they have like Fire Spout, Pyroclasm. If they have cheap sweepers, this is 3 creatures for 1 at a cost that's not that bad. Yeah. And even though 4 mana may seem a little steep, a lot of the matchups where you bring it in, your opponent has Path to Exile. So you're Tarmogoyf, they're like Path it, and you're like, all right, thanks. Turn 3 Ranger of Eos. And and then they have to deal with that, and then 2 more cards, you know?
Yeah, and the 1 mana cards you're getting are, you know, I mean, they can be 4 or 5s. Yeah, shocks every turn. Yeah. All right, so I see 4 Mindbreak Trap right here. That's a lot of respect for the Storm deck. Is that the one matchup you wanted then?
Well, for this tournament specifically, we knew that if you could figure out what like any specific person was playing, then you could like metagame against them more easly. Right,
because there's only 16 players in the tournament.
Yeah, so and since you know that like one person is like 7 or 8% of the field, like that's huge. And especially since the top 4, like all the prizes at the top for this tournament, and the top 4 matches are best of 5. So sideboard games are like even more important.
Right.
So if you know that someone's going to play a certain deck and you play them in top 8, then you just win.
Yeah.
So like we had a pretty strong read that at least 1 or 2 people would play Storm, and we thought that it would be like really, really foolish if you just underprepared for it. If you're like, I know this guy's going to play Storm, I pick my deck, and then you play against him and lose, it's like, well, you know that you could have done something different to beat that person.
Yeah, because of the weighted value of sideboard games, especially at the top. All right, so we've got the Mindbreak Traps. We have Thalia, obviously, for decks with a lot of non-creature spells. You need to disrupt them. 2 Grafdigger's Cage for Birthing Pod and Storm.
Absolutely.
And finally, the 4th Geist of St. Traft to add resiliency. Oh, and this is a really rock-solid deck. It has one plan. It executes it very well. It's very proactive, kind of no-nonsense. I really like decks like this, and it's pretty exciting for me to watch. Thanks so much for coming on. We really appreciate it. Owen Turtenwald playing Zoo along with Reid Duke. I'm Zac Hill here at the Tournament Center. Stay tuned for more Magic at the Players' Championship.